First of all, I want to say that after the two atomic bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the war ended shortly after that, and we were going to actually invade Japan during the Operation Olympic. There was going to be the 3rd Amphibious Corps, and I think it was the 7th Army. And we were going to actually invade Kyushu, and so what the orders were that we were to go into that area and occupy the territory that we were going to actually invade. So we went to a place called Sasebo, which, in my understanding, it was a naval training base, and also they had sub-pens there, and it was equivalent to our Annapolis, from what I've been told. And we actually stayed in the quarters when we first got there as a naval training station. But I remember the first day we went aboard trucks and were transported to our buildings where we were going to stay, and all you could see was the Japanese police. They were dressed in black, and they would be directing us to traffic wherever we to go. But as far as civilians, we never saw any civilians that first part where we landed, but we found out later that all the women and children had hid from us because they had heard that the Marines were very, very savage men, and they had been taught about things which we did not actually do or were not capable of committing. The one thing in our orders we were told, we do not bother, talk to, or have any affiliation with the Japanese citizen. The other second thing we were told not to do, they had these temples of worship. Buddha was one of them. He said, in no circumstances do we go in or around or desecrate it anyway, that we totally were to avoid those at all costs. But the first thing I knew was that after we invaded, it wasn't only a short time later, maybe 2 weeks or so, that the Japanese children would come out, and they had been taught to ask the Marines there for gifts, and they used to come out and they would say, "Chocolatito for Mama." That was, we had this tropical chocolate in our rations, and then the little boys would say, "Cigaretto for Papa." They liked their cigarettes, and so it wasn't long that they found out, and even some of the men, you could give them coins, and it seemed like our first breakdown and being accepted was with the little children. And then later on, the shops were opened up, and we would go in town and we would buy things. I had bought several things as souvenirs. I had bought a camera. I bought some kimonos that I brought home to my mother, which later became the possession of my wife. But we traveled around. It was very remote. The roadway was very poor. We had traveled over the Kyushu Island for quite a few miles in jeeps, and we had saw a lot of the circumstances that faced these Japanese people. They were very poor people, and they had literally nothing to live on. The war effort had taken everything I think that was important and valuable to them. I remember after the division broke up, I got put in a motor transport company, and I don't know the name of the company other than it was just the motor transport. And so I left the 5th Division and I became a truck driver there. And one of our duties was to go down to the docks and unload ships to take groceries and commissary products to different areas. And I remember we got a cook sergeant, and he said, "Fellas, when you unload frozen meat," he said, "I want you to bring the truck by our commissary here." So we were driving back, and he'd get on there and look at the code numbers. He'd say, "Take this box off and that box." He said, "The rest of you can take." And I must say that was probably the best eating I had while I was in the Marine Corps, because he took things very, very carefully and prepared them to make it taste as near home cooking as you could. And of course, I drove other trucks. I remember taking sometimes dump trucks. One particular day, I was instructed to go pick up 2 Japanese laborers and take them down to a place where they were going to load gravel aboard the dump truck for work on the road repair. And as I was going down Sasebo Street, I never had driven a dump truck before, and I got to checking all the levers on, see what controlled what. And I was driving along, and I heard these Japanese guys yelling, "Stop, stop, stop." And I stopped and got out, and here one of the levers I had pushed, and kicked the dump bed up, and they were hanging to the top of it down, ready to fall in. And so that was one of my, I guess, funny experiences I had on there. But after that, we proceeded on, and they loaded our truck, and I delivered to the area that I was supposed to. Oh, there were just a lot of things we did. I remember in the area where we had this new mess hall in motor transport, I remember one of the things that really saddened me. When we come out, we always had a garbage can sitting outside the mess hall. And these Japanese workers there, they'd be waiting at their little pans. If we had any garbage, any scraps on the pan, they want them to dump in so they could eat them. So it really made me aware of how hungry these people were. And I think it was the first time that I began to feel sorry for some of the Japanese people that had to survive this. Oh, there was a lot of other experiences that we had. I know we were about 25, 30 miles from Nagasaki, where the second atomic bomb had been dropped. If you know anything about the motor vehicles in the Army, all the dials, speedometer gauges, they were aluminum dialed like in a clock. And I've been told that those that went down there and drove over that area, that the radioactive material in there actually took all the life out of those gauges and things. They no longer work or would glow in the dark. But there were just a lot of things that happened on that island. And I began to see the transformation when we left in the following May. So my times on the island was very informative. I learned a lot about the Japanese people. I learned a lot about the reason for war that they had and their control that the Emperor Hirohito had over them, because whatever he said, they did, and did it faithfully because they considered him their God. So I don't know much more than I can tell, but it would be pretty repetitious. So I think that pretty much adds up to what I experienced in Japan. So.
Okay. You said you left Japan in May.
It was either April or May, I'm not quite sure, but we boarded a transport. Of course, we didn't have the company of the ships, that the DEs, the destroyer escort. We came back on our own, and we came back from Japan. We went the northern route. You kind of seem like you go up toward Alaska, and then you come down to San Francisco, which apparently, according to the map, is the shortest route. But the one event that I'll never remember, when we were coming back, I don't know, we were about halfway, I think, between Japan and San Francisco. We were down in the deck playing cards in the hold there, and all at once general quarters would sound on the PA system of the ship, and I felt the ship make a right turn. You could feel the keel go toward the right and turn, and it came over the PA system. Whoever conducting the announcement said, "Mine, dead ahead, dead ahead." And so we went up on deck, and one of the Marines there was a sharpshooter. He had an M1 rifle, and this mine apparently had broken loose from one of the minefields around, had drifted up into the North Atlantic. And he was a pretty good shot because he shot that, and that mine went off. Had it went off with the ship hitting it, I doubt there'd been much hope for us because it looked like a powerful explosion when it went off. So from there, we made it on back to San Francisco. We went to a place called Treasure Island. And Treasure Island was a place where it was a large military naval base there. And I remember the day we arrived that there was throngs of people waiting on there waving us, welcoming us home. And it was kind of a warm-hearted experience to know that we had a country where people loved us and respected us for what we did. We unloaded there, and we went into a barracks there on Treasure Island. I spent, I don't know, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, I don't remember, on San Francisco, where we had liberty from there. And I was able to cross the Golden Gate Bridge and also the bridge over into Oakland, California. And the one thing that I remember, one day we were in these barracks. They were really nice, good bunk beds, mattresses. They had restrooms with showers and everything you needed, and the mess halls were good. I looked out the window one day and I saw these large fences out there. They had barbed wire on the top of them, And I said to one of the naval men there, I says, what in the world they have a barbed wire on top of these fences for? He said, don't you know? I said, well, know what? He said, this was a German prisoner of war camp during the war. I say to you today that those guys lived much better than we did in the service, where we slept in pyramid tents, nothing but grass on the floor. They had all the education, all the comforts of home. I'm surprised that many of them didn't want to go back. If they did go back, they wanted to come back. So that was an eye-opening experience I had, that the soldiers that were POWs were treated like heaven to them, where the Japanese, our prisoners, lived in torture camps, where they were starved to death, beaten, and died of hunger, malnutrition, and disease. Because I've heard so many stories about how they were treated, and I know to this day that we as a nation, even though we were at war with the Japanese, we certainly treated them like kings compared to the way they treated our prisoners.
When did you get discharged?
Well, leading up to that, we left San Francisco on a troop train. We came over the mountains. I'll never forget, we came down into Denver, Colorado, and then we went across Salt Lake in Utah. And we ended up at the naval station up in Michigan there. It was the naval center there. That's where we were going to be discharged. And I remember that about the day that we were getting ready to be discharged, we didn't have much, no liberty there at all, which we'd had in San Francisco. We were pretty much confined to the naval station there. They called it Great Lakes Naval Training Station. And I'll never forget that we were interviewed. We got of course we got our uniforms, our greens in San Francisco, and so we at least had our dress uniforms with us. And I'll never forget the day we went in to get discharged, and I sat down. This fellow there at the recruiting station, he asked me all about it. He says, now, I want to offer you something. I said, what's that? He says, well, if you are willing to ship over, we will give you your next stripe, which would maybe about driving. I said, sir, no thank you. I said, I've had all I want. I said, all I want is get out of this place and go home, to be in a place where I feel safe and I have my family to love me. So I left Great Lakes. I think it was, if I remember, the Indianapolis 500 speed limit, or a racetrack was on that day. And I went and got aboard the Pennsylvania Railroad train in Chicago, and I headed to my home, which was in Hopedale, Ohio. And the train was bound for Steubenville, Ohio. But you know, before we got to Steubenville, they made a stop at the Denison-Yearsville track and station there. And I said to them, getting off, I got off and I hitchhiked to my home in Hopedale because I was so anxious to get home. I couldn't wait any longer. So I got, my final ride was in. Somebody was gracious enough to pick up a serviceman and take me to my home. So that pretty much ends my experience in while I was in his service. I was glad to be home. I was proud of what I had done. I was not disappointed in anything that I had done, but I certainly did not want to go through any more of it. I got back home. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was kind of a mixed up guy. I'll tell you what I had originally thought of. I had been so impressed with California, being in Liberty in Los Angeles and San Francisco. I really felt that I was going to go back to California and live. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I felt there was something that I could do. And I told my parents, well, I don't think they were very happy with that idea, but if that was my choice, I think they would have accepted it. But as time went on, I just didn't know what to do. And I had worked for this Timken company at the camp. And this fellow, his name was Ray Lucas. He had been in the Army. He'd been in the Battle of Anzio in Italy during the Second World War. And he'd worked for Timken. And one day I ran into Ray and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, Ray. He said, why don't you come back to Canton and go to work for Timken? He says, I know that they're really wanting people back. So I drove back with him, went to Canton, Ohio, and I went back to Timkins and I got a job there. So that was the beginning of my industrious life of working until I retired in 1982.
When you got back home, just kind of backtrack a little bit, do you remember the first night you laid in your own bed again? What that was like?
I don't know if it was the first night. I remember my mind was, I don't know, I can't explain my mind, but going over what I want to do, what it's going to be. I thought, well, maybe for a while, I thought, well, maybe I should have re-enlisted. I thought of that offer that he made me, and I thought, oh, I made a good choice there. And I just don't remember. I thought of a lot of things that I'd like to do. I thought about my time in the military and that. I don't really know what my mind really set on that time. But a lot of things had gone through my mind, and being that long ago, I don't quite remember it all. I just know I was a mixed up young guy. I didn't have my feet, but I even thought the other thing I thought about was joining the State Highway Patrol, because they would, with your military training at that time, they would accept you, you know.
Yeah.
But that was only a thought. I never really applied for it. Like I say, this fellow, Ray Lucas, came and approached me, and it seemed it was the first time that I'd had a suggestion maybe to start me off. And that really kind of rehabilitated me.
Okay, so would you agree that maybe you're a little overwhelmed with everything when you came back?
I was just mixed up. I can't tell you. There were so many things facing, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. That's all I can tell you. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Was there any PTSD that went on? I'm sure you probably had some nights where it was hard to sleep.
I remember a lot of those memories. In fact, after he got married, which was over 2 years later. No, it was only a year later. I know my wife Margaret said, "Did you really have some bad dreams?" Because I apparently woke up carried on, and I don't remember what I dreamed about, but this went on for a while. A lot of things I couldn't get out of my mind. And I don't know, I guess some things are so indelibly instilled in your memory you don't get rid of them. There's things but I know after a while I really got myself organized when I started raising a family. That was really when I realized I had responsibility. And up to that time I didn't feel I had responsibility. But when I got married, we had our first daughter in 10 months. I realized then I was a father and a husband, and I had to be a supporter of my family. So from then on, I took an interest in my job, and I went to work, and I think I increased my position there. I advanced to the place where I'd really never dreamed of.
Yeah.
Because I eventually, after about 25 years of the company, I might say this, that during that time, after I got up in Canton, I went back to McKinley Night School, and I got my diploma that I had not gotten in the getting rid of my senior year, going into the service. I was able to get that, and I graduated with a high school diploma. And that was one of the best things I did, I think, because it helped me in a lot of things I did later. In fact, the company moved me up into the position of a supervisor, which to this day I don't know why, but apparently I must have performed in a way that they were satisfied with.
How did you meet your wife? You said you were a bachelor for a while, and then all of a sudden.
Well, I'll tell you, this fellow Ray Lucas and I, after I'd come back to Canton, and I hadn't been to work too long for Tipton, and he said, "Well, let's go out." It was I think it was a Saturday night, and we went to this little place. It was really out in that kind of the country from Canton. It's called the Colonnade, and Ray and I went in there, and we were looking around. There wasn't too many people there. We saw these two girls there, and I walked over to the girl. I said, "Would you girls like to dance?" And they said, oh yes. So Ray, he had one and I had the other girl. We danced that night. We took them home. I never even kissed her that night. We made it count. And I got her name and address. And I told her, I says, I'll give you a call. Well, I don't know how much time went by, several weeks. I don't know, I was working for the company and I was on a four shift schedule, which meant I was working odd shifts and weekends, everything. I didn't call her, and finally one night, I decided I got her number on, I give her a call. And she almost didn't remember me, although she did. She said, I thought I'd never see you again. So we got a date then, and we started dating, and she was only 17, and I was, I would have been 20 then. And we went together, we met in, I think October of 1946. And we were married the following July the 5th, 2047. And it was a war years. You couldn't buy a new car. You had an awful time getting an apartment. But anyhow, I bought a used car and we rented a place, and then we finally got into what they call the Metropolitan Housing District. It had been like a barracks for the workers at the E.W. Bliss Company, which was at that time was a naval gun ordnance plant, where they build guns for the Navy. And we lived in that for several years. And we had one daughter. We had two daughters. And in 1955, I applied for a VA loan, and I got a loan for a house. We paid all the way to, I think it was $12,000 for a 2-bedroom bungalow house. And the thing I was so glad of, right at the house on the corner was a bus stop where they pick up my daughters for school. So it led from there that they grew up, and our marriage was a wonderful marriage. I tell you, I got a girl that was a sweet girl, and I loved her with all my heart. And we just bonded together so wonderfully. And then, of course, we were both saved at a revival meeting back on November the 15th, 1955. And our lives were totally changed and transformed. And I can say this day, it's been a wonderful life. But I lost my wife here on April the 29th, 2016. She will be gone April 2 years. We had been married 69 years. And I'll tell you, when she passed away, a part of my life was gone. But you know, with God's blessing and his reward, I continue to be on to this day. I thank him for his goodness, for his patience, and for above all, for his love.